Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara Fountain and I am the founder and CEO of the Young Tongues, a peer-to-peer support group for young tongue cancer patients across the world. And I'm bringing you another exciting episode as every week, but I have another fabulous member of our community with me today. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you, and we'll start this off like we always do. We like to get to know our guests beyond the cancer diagnosis. So, if you can introduce yourself to our listeners, who is Amy?
Sure. So I'm a wife. I'm a cat mom. I work for a software company as a leader in our product management space, and I have a vast array of friends and family. I'm an aunt. I have two nieces that are just absolutely delightful. I have a wonderful opportunity of living in the northwest portion of the state of Georgia near Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is just a beautiful part of the U.S. And it's the place that I grew up, and then we got a chance to move back. Love being out of doors and doing all sorts of things outside kayaking, hiking, walking. I One of the bright sides of the last 6 months or so as I've been going through treatment and all of that has been I've rediscovered some hobbies. So I enjoy knitting. I picked up bird watching, which should tell you right off the bat that I'm in my 40s. And I have had the opportunity to just spend a lot of time with family and doing all sorts of um, maybe just fun things in the midst of a lot of other things going on. So I,
Amazing. Sounds like a beautiful place. Another destination to add to my growing list of places to visit.
yeah,
Now we like to start at the beginning. Now you've just mentioned it, 6 months. You are still very fresh out of treatment. So shall we start at the beginning? When did you first realise something wasn't quite right?
yeah. About a year ago in May of 2024, I developed a sore, just an ulcer. It came and went a bit over the next few months, and I kept saying, I needed to get this checked out. I had a lot going on. We had a lot going on family wise, I had a lot going on work wise, and I just didn't. I had a dentist appointment in September, and at that point, it had been 3, 4 months, and there had been times where the pain was worse, and times where I didn't feel it at all for several days or a week or 2 weeks. At the dentist appointment, I had my dentist take a look. He said, it sounds like it might be a blocked sublingual gland, like under
Oh
your.
yes.
And then I also needed a filling. So he numbed me up and we did the filling. And in the next 2 weeks after that, things just went crazy. They just felt like, and I've had fillings before, and like a couple of days I'm sore. The, the, the sore that I had been dealing with just was very unhappy. A couple of weeks after that, I started having pain in my ear and up and down my neck. And so I went back. I saw a different dentist. They just sort of float. I see a couple of different ones, different dentists at the same practice. And she took a look and said, you need to see an ENT. There's something. She's like, I can't really tell much. We did x rays, that sort of thing. We I got into an ENT. I think it was 2 weeks after that appointment. In the in between, I had, this is looking back on it, this is super interesting to me. I had a work trip planned, and I also had a bucket list concert planned with three of my closest friends for many, many years. And I had this day, it was Thursday, November 14th, where I presented that morning to my company's board of directors, and that was sort of like a professional bucket list item. And then I hopped on a plane, flew home, met my girlfriends at the arena. We saw Pink, who has been my favorite artist for many, many years. Incredible concert. Just everything I
She's
hoped it would be.
incredible. I've seen her
Oh,
live. The way
oh.
she twirls across.
And as they were setting that up, they set up a podium like not even 15 feet from us. And so as part of that,
Wow.
she landed like right there. I mean, it's just true bucket list stuff. The following Wednesday, I went to an ENT and he was fantastic. He took one look and said, "We're going to biopsy." I was like, "Biopsy? I'm here by myself. That sounds terrible."
Hmm.
And he was very concerned. He was also very direct about what he thought was going on. He didn't say, "This is cancer." He said, "We're going to biopsy. If it is, you need to know things are going to move pretty quick and you need to be prepared for what it's probably going to look like." And I walked away from that appointment uh, with the impression that he would be very surprised if it came back not cancerous. And
Hmm.
I hadn't really, I tend to bury my head in the sand at times when something intimidates me. And so I had known that that might be an option, but I'm 41, not a smoker. I haven't drunk socially in 4 or 5 years, and before that, it was just social drinking. I've had good um, mouth oral health, never an issue, right? So it just wasn't something that was even on my radar. He put a stat read on the biopsy. That was a Wednesday. We got results the following Monday. Came back. It was squamous cell carcinoma. He put in for a PET scan, which we did that the next, like 2 days later. Did an MRI the following Monday. Met with him again um, the following Monday. So it was within about 10
Hmm. It's
days.
very fast,
He
yes.
was fantastic. I was so
Yeah.
grateful for how quickly he moved through that phase. The waiting was hard. The waiting was really tough. It would have been so much harder if I felt like we weren't doing anything in that waiting. That was the week of the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday, and so we had planned to go to the beach to camp, and we canceled our trip, stayed home, did tests. When we met with him the following Monday, he said, "Okay, uh, the PET scan showed tumor in the tongue and activity in the lymph node, and that was consistent with what I had experienced physically." So he staged it at a stage 3 and referred me to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, which is a couple hours, about 2.5 hours away. He said the size of the tumor um, he assumed would need reconstruction, the reconstructive surgery part, and he said he does those, but he does maybe 6 to 8 a year, maybe a dozen. He said the team at Vanderbilt do 3 plus a week. He's like, you'll have to
Hmm.
advocate for yourself, but you're gonna get like they do this all the time. I was happy for the referral. Met with the surgeon on December
That's
12th.
incredibly. I just want to pick that up for the ENT. That's incredibly kind.
Oh,
Like,
he was wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
because lots of I always think there's a bit of personal pride as well with surgeons, and for him to go, yeah, you know what, you go with a team who does this routinely. That's incredibly kind and generous of him. Instead of thinking, I'll take this on because I should basically, yeah.
I was very grateful for that. He mentioned at the time because we are like, "Will we come back and see you after?" Like I didn't know how things would go, and he was like, no. Once I hand you off to another surgeon, surgeons are pretty control oriented, so you won't have to come back and see me." Okay.
He knew his audience then, so
He did, and he works. I think he has a professional relationship with the team there, so he
okay.
had an idea of who he was referring me to. We met with the surgeon December 12th, and her name is Dr. Sarah Rohde, and she is phenomenal. She, I was not at all happy about, I mean, obviously, the diagnosis, and I was particularly intimidated by treatment, right? Like, I've
Mm-hmm.
never had surgery. I've never I've never even had, like, I've had an IV once, like, I way out of my wheelhouse, and what I had read online, the extensiveness of the forearm, um, the reconstruction, the neck dissection, just all
It
of it. I
blows your
was,
mind, doesn't it?
it really
When they
does.
explain it verbally, you just go, have you lost your mind? Like, because it
Yes,
feels so alien.
it really
Obviously, now
does.
we know we all go through that, but
Right.
in that moment, especially, I mean, most of us didn't know tongue cancer existed before we got diagnosed with it.
No, and I had not yet found the Young Tongues group, and so I really was struggling to find much online that wasn't in the upper age range of the typical diagnosis. And so we met with the surgeon, and she did a wonderful job building my confidence in what we were going to do. She said, "You have a long life ahead of you, and we are going to, you're on," she's like, "you're right on the edge of needing reconstruction, but we want to make sure that you have good tongue function. And so we're going to go with the reconstruction." And she explained, you'll have a tracheostomy, you'll have, the forearm piece, you'll have a neck dissection. She went all through it. Um, I was no less pleased with my circumstances, but I was much more confident in the path that we were going to take. And both,
Accepting of what was ahead.
so eventually, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
To be fair, I'm still in that modus of accepting. I've not quite arrived it, but yeah, kind of going, okay, that's the plan. We have to do it. There
exactly.
is
And
no alternative B.
for sure. And it was nice to have a plan. That was the part that had also gotten hard in the couple of weeks of waiting, was like, I think this is what it's going to look like, but what is it really going to look like? And, I was pretty terrified of coming out of surgery. Was I going to be able to speak? Was I going to be able to eat? Was I going to be able to, like, you know, she built confidence that yes, all of those things would be there, but you don't know, right? And this is extensive. Surgery was scheduled for January 8th of 2025, which in one way was super nice because we got the holidays and I could say, okay, surgery is a 2025 problem. Let me just go live life. And we ended up with a gap in doctor appointments and got to go to the beach where we hadn't been able to in November. And family had a wonderful, wonderful time at Christmas. I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here and say,
Yeah, please do.
I'd be remiss in talking about this part of the journey if I didn't also talk about the community around me and also my workplace. I would never wish on anyone the reason to see the strength of your community that like we've gone through, but the people in my life showed up in spades, just genuinely kind, caring. What do you need? I want to spend time with you. Time is my love language. Just there's a depth of, I've always valued relationship. I've always been a strong relationship builder. There's an added depth of care and humanity and connection that was deeply meaningful to me during the whole thing, but especially that phase. My mother in law's church runs like a cancer support ministry, and they send cards. And the amount of cards, I should have gotten my box out before we started talking, but my sister at Christmas gave me a keepsake box, and she said, I think you're going to get some things that you want to hold on to during this. And so, and it is overflowing. And many of those are from people I don't know, and they, in their faith, offered prayer for me and took time out of their day to send me encouraging notes. And just it was a picture of humanity and support. And I've always been a fairly independent person. Like, I can get through life, I can do things, I can, and it was such a gift. It was such a gift and such a
Oh, I was just gonna say, like obviously we don't wish this on anyone, and the negative sides, just they're just there, right? But it's also, I do think, important to pay tribute to the silver linings, the gifts that this experience really give us. And similar to you, I had a very similar experience where I don't think I ever in my life before realized that I was loved. And I thought, like,
Yes.
I mean, how sad that you need to have this type of event to really understand the outpouring of love and care for you, and that, you know, you've taken up space in other people's life and they want to be part of yours. So, yeah, I completely can see how that would be it's such a precious gift.
And I love the way that you said that because I realized just just me as a human, like existing, that was what people loved, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a boss, I'm a friend, I'm a spouse, I'm these things, but I'm me, and that's what people love, and that was
Yeah.
it was a powerful gift, a very powerful gift for me.
Yeah. And it's that little time period as well when I think, when it's the most intense, where all your identities are stripped from you within a moment. Because
Absolutely.
I was a business owner, I was a spouse, a friend, a football fanatic. Had so many different identities, but all of them just fell off because they weren't important. And then to give this precious gift of love and realizing that you're enough. I
Seriously.
mean,
Mm.
wow.
And I
Yeah.
am a driven, high performer, high achiever, just always have been. And walking away from 2024, 2023, 2024 were years of incredible momentum for me professionally. And having a sudden stop to that, and I'll talk in just a second about my employer, this is a good segue, but having a sudden stop to that was something I grieved.
Mm.
Just I had this idea of how the next few months were going to go. We have our big company event. I was probably going to get to play a more front and center role in some of our presentations, and my team was doing some amazing work and just all sorts of momentum. And suddenly, to your point, you're just a person, and it also, while was something I grieved, it was also something I think I really needed. Like, I could have gone my whole life wrapped in high achievement, high performance, really pushing myself, and missed some things that I hope I gathered or grasped during that experience. And I hope that I'll have that perspective continuing forward.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, the other part during this time frame, my employer has been phenomenal from day one. I messaged my boss, who is our chief technology and product officer, right after the appointment with the ENT where we did the biopsy. And I said, hey, this is perhaps more serious than I thought that it may have been. And here's what's going on. If it comes back as worst case, it's going to move very quickly, and you're going to have some things that you have to figure out about how to cover what I'm not there to do, right? And he and I've worked together for several years and have a good relationship of trust. And so he was like, Amy, like, just go away. Like, we've got
Yes.
this, right? Like,
Mm.
focus on your family, focus on your health. Once we got through the week of Thanksgiving and everybody was coming back from the holiday, he and I met with my team and I told him what was going on. And I said, and I wanted to meet with them and tell them so that I didn't just disappear and then
Mm-hmm.
not put, because I looked perfectly normal, right, at that time. Like, and so I felt like to hear someone say, oh, she has stage 3 cancer is far scarier than like to see and say, oh, okay, it's Amy and she's going to deal with this really tough thing, but she's okay. So anyway, we met with my team and he was just was super supportive. My company as a whole CEO, our head of HR, all of my team, my peers, everybody just, they were like, what can we do? They covered the work. They stepped up for new things. They were like, go away. Go focus on what you
Mm.
need to focus on. We have a strong short term disability policy that could go up to 6 months. I was able to take the full 6 months. I just last week started part time back into work, ramping up for an early July return. And throughout it, there's just been nothing but support of, we want to make sure you know what's going on and the places where things are really cool that you had an impact on, that the momentum is continuing forward, but also go take care of your health. We want to know how things are going, but like, please don't give us a second thought. And that gift of time to focus on what was a very challenging mental treatment plan and path,
Mm.
just I can't imagine. My heart breaks whenever I hear stories that are the opposite or
Yeah.
less
Well,
than supportive.
I was going to say, I'm always so happy when we can talk of good examples of good support for individuals, because I think it's also quite difficult for employers sometimes to know how to be supportive and how to communicate that. And also, I mean, there's always a difference. There are employers that care, and there are employers that just frankly don't care. And ultimately, wouldn't it be a great thing if we could all get to a place where those that don't care have to care? um, and I think in the US it's even harder than here in the UK or Europe, just because the amount of people that lose their jobs instantly of diagnosis, and their pay stops instantly, and then there's no the safety net of benefits doesn't exist in the same level as it does here in the UK. And I must admit, I think what we're doing in the UK is nowhere near enough to really help patients heal, and not just heal, but also be able to find the pathway back into work and back into society. And because ultimately that's the best outcome for everyone. It's the best outcome for the patient, and it's the best outcome for the company, and it's the best outcome for the economy, if you want to take it up to a big scale. So I'm always really happy to hear good examples of that. I think maybe once we've gone through the treatment, we can talk about what it's like for you now returning as well, because I think that is a really interesting dynamic. And also, bearing in mind, if who knows, we might have an employer listening to this one day who's thinking, oh, I wonder how I can support my tongue cancer patients. So
For sure. I have
yeah.
contemplated turning my experience into a bit of like an industry presentation or something, just to say like, hey, really tough things happen to your employees, and you have a million different ways that you could respond, but here's an example of what was a really good, strong, supportive response. So, yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
well, if you get round to that, let us know, because we'd love to. We'd love
I will.
to
I
circulate that
will.
the young tongues as well. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, so your colleagues, employers, you had that chat. So you're back at home
Mhm.
waiting at this
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
Did you have a bit of time off before the surgery, or did you
I
work all the
did.
way?
No, I had about. I ended up with about a month. I pretty much took the full month of December off, which I had already had a good bit of time planned to be off for holidays and all of that. But I had that month pretty much off, which was really nice because it was very loud mentally. Uh, and I don't really know how I would have fit work on top of everything else that I was processing. Surgery was January 8th, and walking into the surgery check in, checking myself in for surgery, hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, as when we go back now for appointments, not every time, but occasionally I have to walk back by that same spot, and it is a visceral acknowledgement of how hard that moment was for me. Um, got checked in, went back. One of the really cool things that Dr. Rhodey and her team have done is figure out how to get this surgery, which can be 12, 14, it can be quite long, to a very efficient, less than 8 hour surgery. So I was in
Oh my
her
God.
for between 7 and 8 hours, and it was
That's a
full.
game changer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, they have. I asked her about this. I had a follow up a couple of weeks ago, and I told her I was coming on here, and that one of the things I wanted to make sure people knew is that someone was doing the work to shorten this. And she said, time under is the strongest indicator of patient survival. And she was like, we just have gotten it down to a very efficient process. So, um, had the tongue reconstruction, the neck dissection. She used one of my wrinkles for the neck dissection, and I've never been so glad to have wrinkles. um, they put the trach in, had the forearm donor site, and then the leg graft to cover the arm site. Um, they move you to a step down unit, so it is not ICU, and it's also not a standard hospital floor. It's an in between. The equipment was more like a standard floor, but the service level for nursing check ins and patient to nurse ratio was closer to ICU. And so I was in the hospital for 5 days. I am probably one of the few who didn't mind the trach. I didn't have a lot of
That was
swelling. Hmm.
that was my first question. I was going to, because I didn't have a trach, and but I have obviously heard the feedback from the community. So I am so glad
I,
that
I,
you had a different experience.
I think because it went in obviously while I was in surgery and
Yeah.
not in any sort of an emergency scenario. And she said we do this proactively because if we need it, then having it there makes things 5,000 times easier. Um, but I have a history of anxiety, and one of the ways I have coped with that is really learning some deep breathing. Just it helps. It's one of my go-tos. And when I got to the room after surgery and realized that I could do some really seriously calming deep breathing through the trach, and I was fine. I could talk, I could breathe through my nose. I had normal swelling, but not a ton. But once I realized I could do that through the trach, I actually had a much calmer first couple of days where it was just really intense, because when it got really intense, I could just close down, focus on breathing, and I could get really good breath because I had that in. And so I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, and I wanted it gone. And it was gone by the time I left the hospital because I was just determined, right? I was like, what are the milestones? Walking through them. Let's go. Um, but it actually worked really nicely for me personally because it gave me a place I could go in my body to really calm and soothe a world where nothing was calming and soothing to me at that time.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, it's a very loud environment as
it
well, with all the
is.
beeping and people running around, and you're never quite sure if they're running around because of you or someone else. And
For sure.
but I find your retelling of the trike experience so interesting, and that is always when I speak to clinicians about the support group. We've had many threads about the trike, and I love it when we've got this really good balance of different experiences, and it is so good. It is important that we acknowledge the bad ones
Hmm.
and that
For
we
sure.
talk them through. Yeah, and I also feel there is a huge difference if someone can explain to you what it might feel like before you have it,
Hmm.
because if you don't know what to expect or are completely in a different level of expectations, it must be an absolutely horrifying, scary place to wake up to.
And I should say, I knew going in I would have one, and we had talked about what does that mean? What does it feel like? And I feel like mine was really well placed. It didn't. It didn't. Maybe it was that everything else was bothering me, and it was just lower on the priority list for my body to be annoyed with. But it was not uncomfortable beyond what it actually is. So anyway, that was not a terrible experience. I had the feeding tube down the nose, which I just abhorred. That was the worst part of it for me. Um, the other thing too, I have some dietary restrictions, dairy and gluten, and
Oh, oh,
yeah,
that's difficult.
yeah, and we had talked about it before, and they said, yeah, we'll have a supplement for you, and they did, and this is where some of my food snobbiness is going to show through. But it was not really a. It was very. It was like things that you couldn't pronounce, right? And
Okay.
it included aspartame, which also bothers me. I just have a finicky body with some of the food sensitivities. And so it was fine for the time that I was in the hospital, but my husband found one of the clean meal replacement products that for NG and peg tubes that he bought to have at home whenever we got home. And that made a huge difference. And if I ever have to go back for anything where I know I'm going to potentially have, that's one thing I'm going to handle differently. Of just up front, probably just show up with my own feeding supplements and be like, "This is what I want," because
Yeah.
it made a big difference with the overall healing of the body.
That's actually, yeah, lacto-free dairy intolerance is really challenging because if we think about building up fat after with soft, it's cream,
Mm-hmm.
it's milkshakes,
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah, protein. I don't know, protein powder probably doesn't have that in, but what do you
Some,
mix it with? It
yeah.
does have some. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to find those products without and gluten as well without those traces in it must be really quite challenging.
The good news is, I think in today's world, there are a lot more alternatives than there were probably
Mm,
even 10 years ago. And once we started figuring out what to look for, we found several good
oh, that's
options.
good.
But I just didn't, kind of took the hospital at the word of like, oh, we'll have something for you. And I think in hindsight, I would handle that differently. But um, spent 5 days in the hospital, came home. I was like, oh my gosh, why have they let me come home? What do I do now? Fortunately,
Oh yes.
it was,
Oh
wow,
yes.
coming home was its own beast of an experience. Fortunately, my mother in law is a retired registered nurse, and she came for the first week that we were home. And so they were staying in an Airbnb a few minutes down the road, and we got home, and I was like, call your mother to my husband. Like, I don't know what to do. Somebody's been taking care of me, like, you need your medicine now, and now, and now, and now. And anyway, so she helped us tremendously in that first week at home, just with routine and let my husband get out to his office. I should mention my husband's doing his PhD and was in his final semester working on his dissertation.
Oh my
Um,
god.
and he is he is a very determined person and an amazing caregiver. And he gave me the most amazing care I could ever imagine. And he finished his PhD
Oh
on time. He
wow.
graduated in May.
That's incredible. Oh,
It
what a
was
stressful time on two front. Wow.
he handled it brilliantly. So we were home. I got the went back and got the NG tube out. I healed really well from surgery. We had like the year prior, a good friend of mine was turning 50, and there was a 90s cruise with like bands from the 90s that she wanted to go on. And it was scheduled for the end of January. And we didn't cancel. initially because they were like, I don't know, maybe,
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 maybe.
probably not, but maybe. Anyway, I was healing really well. Talked to the surgeon. I was like, "Can I go on a cruise?" And they were like, "I mean, don't get in the pool." I was like, "I don't get in the pools on cruises anyway." They're like, be smart about it and don't go out in the sun." But sure. So the end of January is about 3.5 weeks after surgery. We went on a cruise, and let me tell you, that was very hard mentally and also very life giving because stood on the ship of that or the deck of that ship and I realized like okay there's a life after all of this, right? Like it felt like everything had changed, everything felt different, but I was on a cruise with friends enjoying it. That was something that hadn't changed, so that was a true gift. We came back and I started radiation. I
So did they already tell you before surgery about
They
radiation, or
did.
did they look at your histology? Oh,
They did.
well, because you did mention the lymph
Mhm.
involvement.
They pretty much the ENT forward said you probably will need radiation because of the lymph node involvement. I was in the gray area for also needing chemo. I had a little bit of the PNI, um, and then a little bit of the lymphatic space invasion.
Okay, yes.
And so I talked with the chemo oncologist, talked with the radiation oncologist. We were doing some genetic testing as well, just because of like where might this have come from, and there was nothing concerning genetically with the tumor. Like it wasn't genetics were not the
Hereditary.
source, right? Thank you. Um, but there was evidence of some other potential DNA damage, and so in talking with the chemo oncologist and her explaining what like cisplatin does, she was like, we might cause more issues than your normal side effects because of the other things that we have seen. And so we decided no go on the chemo. Let's just do the radiation. Let that be what it is. And it also is not as significant for me. It was not a huge percent impact for
Impact, yeah.
preventing recurrence. And we were like, like let's
Oh,
anyway.
back on that.
We just went radiation.
Yeah.
So I had yeah,
This radiation pause. Yeah.
I had 30 sessions, higher dose on the right side, tongue and neck. About kind of midway through, I had a lymph node on the right side that was swollen, and I was
So on
having
the
some.
opposite side of
Mhm.
where they.
I
Hmm.
was having some throat pain, and I told my radiation doctor. I said, "It just feels like the cancer pain felt. Maybe I'm over indexing. It doesn't. It's not great." He said, "Let's scan. Let's see." He did a good CT scan. He said, "I don't love the way it looks." And then they did the math and figured out that we could add 5 sessions on just this side and also for the remaining sessions up the radiation dose and basically get a full dose that they would have shot at a known tumor as a part of the radiation treatment. And I was really glad to be doing radiation when we caught that because it just, I mean, could we have
You
also
don't want to
handled it
go
with
back.
surgery? Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, no.
No.
So we did that. I'm about 2.5 months out from the end of radiation, and it's fine. It's not noticeable or anything like that. Radiation
How were
wasn't.
the.
Mhm.
I was going to say, did the side effects. Did they worsen once you had the other side? Because obviously you can probably compensate, but was it just the whole area
It
was
was just the whole area, and
affected?
they were doing a lower dose to this side, in both the mouth and the neck, and so it was just the dose to that one lymph node area that they
Yeah.
upped. Um, so one of the things that my radiation oncologist had me do, he sent me a study right when I got started out of China where they had used oral probiotics 3 times a day, and the group that used them, not the control group, the group that used them, had shortened duration and intensity of mucositis during radiation. And he said, so
Oh, that's interesting.
if you're interested, you know, you can. I would totally support you trying this. I've had 1 or 2 other patients. It was a relatively recent study. I was like, sure, sign me up. Let's do this. So I would brush my teeth. I would do the bacon soda rinse, and I would do an oral probiotic 3 times a day. And
What does that look like? Is it a drink or is it a swirl or?
it's a small tablet that you just put in your mouth and it dissolves.
Okay.
And so, and for about
Yeah.
30 minutes afterwards, you avoid eating or drinking, but it kind of coats the inside of your mouth and then down your throat. So it was very, and they had a small taste to it, but of course, I couldn't taste them for very long. So, anyway, that I really didn't have significant pain until about week 5. I had some sores, and I had, like, it was not happy in there at all.
Yeah.
Burning,
It,
all
it,
that.
it wasn't a walk in the park. It
No.
was the, yeah.
But week 5 was when it really got bad. 6, and then the 2 to 3 after. But my taste came back within about 4 to 5 weeks after radiation. My sores were mostly gone 4 to 5 weeks after radiation. So he and the sores that I got apparently were not crazy bad comparatively. They were not
Comparatively,
fun
yeah.
for me. But he was very pleased, and felt like that oral probiotic regimen had lived up to what we'd seen in the research and shortened both the duration and the intensity. So that was probably a silver lining there.
That's incredible. I'd love to. I remember you sent me the link to the study actually. And yeah, I'm always a bit guarded in sharing studies because then everyone starts sharing studies and sometimes people don't quite know how to source them or where to get them from. But that looked really, really interesting, and well, it would be great to know if there are any bigger studies happening, like on a global basis.
And that one was out of China, and I think it was the 3rd round. I'm not sure. He explained
Yeah.
it, and it didn't really stick.
Yeah, the
But-
3rd round of funding, so they probably
Yeah,
are upping their patient numbers.
yeah.
Yeah.
It felt very accessible in terms of something that you can do to help. So I was very pleased.
Yeah, and also you being in the American system, your insurance was happy to cover the cost of the probiotic as well. So there must be quite a bit of evidence for them to go, yeah, we're happy to
And they
include
really weren't
that.
that expensive. They were maybe $30 for a 30-day supply. So it was not. It really wasn't. It was not actually a prescription either. It was just over the counter. So
Okay. Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we like that even more. Accessible pharma that actually helps. That's amazing.
yeah.
And
So
I'm also really interested. You just mentioned your taste coming back so quickly, which is also really encouraging. And again, obviously we don't know. We can speculate if there is a link there as well. But that recovery, well, you've already demonstrated in terms of recovering from your surgery that your body is obviously very good at repair and healing, which thankfully most of our young tongues have because we're quite young. That is one benefit, one extra, I don't know, what do you want to call it, an extra tool in our belt that the elderly population don't have. So having that level of healing after the radiation is also really remarkable. And again, I love it. It's a different aspect to like most and the other misery that and I hope it gives people hope to see that there are other outcomes available. Other outcomes are possible as well.
for
Yes.
sure. And I I did not have a peg tube at all.
Hmm.
I both the radiation oncologist and the chemo oncologist told me at the very beginning, and it was very motivating, that they felt like patients that didn't need a tube recovered faster. That was all that my driven type A,
Hmm.
whatever brain needed to hear. There was probably a point where it would have been really nice to have that as a backup. It was about probably 2 weeks, but I knew going into it that I needed to get my weight up and then keep it up. And I just did that like it was my job. I tracked my macros, I ate, I snuck olive oil into as many smoothies as I could. It was, if I'm thinking about the priorities that I had during radiation that I feel like served me well, and my body cooperated, right? And that is not always the case. And I think the prevalency of folks having access to the peg tube and the ability to use is a game changer. Um, but I was able to keep my weight up. I was, for the most part, there were some weeks where it dipped a little bit, but keep it up. And I feel like the taste coming, it actually got a little harder after radiation, because I could start tasting things again, but the textures were off. And so day to day, something might taste or feel different in my mouth. It might be too hard one day and then okay a couple of days later, but I almost didn't know what to eat. And so it almost got a little harder mentally after. But with my taste coming back sooner rather than later, it was super encouraging because it wasn't just, oh, go struggle through eating this thing that you can't taste because you have to keep your weight up because blah, 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 right? It was,
Yeah.
okay, I can actually start to taste a banana or a sweet potato, and that was very motivating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can absolutely see that. And you are right with the peg. It is really interesting. On this, in the last 10 episodes alone, patient episodes, we've had very different experiences. Some that, might have had a really complicated surgical history with, complications, having to have multiple surgeries, and then just not having enough time to recover the body enough before the radiation kicks in, where it makes total sense to place a peg from the very beginning. And then I always think back to the chap we had on, who just persevered through it, and then collapsed, and because he was so malnutritioned, and they ended up having to do emergency nutrition, and it could have killed him. Yeah, and not just that, they had to pause his treatment. So it's get what I'm trying to say is everyone's experience is unique, but also having those different experiences is so difficult to get it right and get the balance right,
It is.
because you don't want to lose your swallow, and keeping that muscle active is really important and beneficial. But at the same time, there are times where that's just not possible.
Right.
And then having the peg is important too. So yeah, so I'm just conscious. So we're coming up at the end of radiation. The 2 weeks after radiation are the most horrible ones, and things then slowly progress. You've just mentioned that you're slowly returning to work. How are you finding that experience? Because that can be quite a shock to the system of getting those timings right and not overdoing it, and then
Yeah. The timing part is, it takes a lot to put Humpty back together again. So between physical therapy and lymphatic drainage, which I've got one of those pump things, which is
oh yes, the
incredible.
masks. Yeah.
Yes, but that takes, a solid half hour a day. Speech, uh, walking, and generally trying to rebuild energy. Sleeping, because it's still a really high priority. I feel like I've been looking at my schedule like I don't actually know where I'm going to fit work because this is taking a lot. And then, of course, some days I just don't feel good. Like some days I've had a string of, oh, this is great. I'm on the up and up, and then not great. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Recovery isn't linear.
it's my
It's
least
not. It's not a
favorite.
normal graph. It goes up and down and ups and down, left and right.
I want it to be linear, and you're exactly right. It is not linear. But I have to be back at work full time July 9th from a benefits and like short term disability ending. So I decided last week to work about 15 hours. This week I'm going up to like 24, just kind of increase it. And I have the great gift of a super flexible employer where like Friday was a really crap day for me and I worked like half hour chunks at like random times through the whole day to get through what I had said I would work, right? And it was totally fine. Um, so far, of course, it's the people are wonderful. It's great to have something mentally to wrap my head around that isn't everything
Mm.
that I've been focused on for the last 6 months or so. I'm super excited about where things are with our company. There's a lot of good momentum and there's a lot of good work happening. And so it's been mentally stimulating in a really good way to get re engaged. I'm going to have to figure out the time management side of that. It's still intimidating me a bit, but um, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time, which is probably the most enduring lesson of this whole thing for me.
Mm.
Is to just take the day as it comes. And I'm a person of faith, and so I have developed just a very grounded core belief that, you know, whatever the day is going to hold, God's going to give me the strength to get through it. And if that's
Yeah.
working for 3 hours, we'll figure it out. If it's I feel like crap and I need to work for 3 hours, we'll also figure it out. It will be okay. And I don't have to worry about what does my schedule look like tomorrow? What does it look like in 2 weeks? What is it going to be like when I go back full time? That's very different for me because I've
Mm.
always lived like, what am I doing in 2 weeks and what can I do today to make what I'm doing in 2 weeks better?
Yeah, it's a
Um,
big shift, isn't it, in your mindset?
mhm.
I'm still trying to make peace with that. My chronic fatigue syndrome, which is really only well, it's been there obviously all along. We just didn't know what
Mhm.
it was.
Mhm.
But now that now that I have that knowledge, I sort of look back and I can see all the mistakes that are made.
Mhm.
For me, a few like key principles and key tips that I've wished I had the opportunity to implement when I was returning to work. When I was returning to work, I was the boss, which was
Oh.
difficult. So it was my own company.
Mhm.
Um, and I totally overdid it and burnt myself out. And
Oh
I
no.
ended up actually having to close the business because I
Oh
realised I
no.
can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's okay.
Mhm.
I've got young tongues now, so
For
it's
sure. Mhm.
it's all worked out. It's actually worked out the way it should do. But a couple of when I then had a short stint in employment, there were a few things I didn't advocate for because I didn't realise that firstly I could or that I should and that it was beneficial for all involved.
Mm.
Whereas now I have these core rules. So I don't have any meetings before 10 a.m.
I'm so glad you said
Just,
that.
yeah, that's just a rule because waking up in the morning, especially after having radiation, it takes probably a while for your mouth to
Mhm.
start functioning and
Mhm.
moisture building and doing your exercises. So it's to give yourself a calm morning where you can go and prepare yourself for your
Mhm.
day. Um, so no meetings before 10 a.m. And when I have meetings, so most of my meetings are short anyhow because they're with people I've not met. But when I have meetings with colleagues, which I had when I was employed, because we were talking about projects and everyone gets really excited and carried away, these meetings could go on for a really long time. And what was even worse, because we're all working remotely, when we then met in person, it was just like the whole day. And you don't want to be the person that goes, oh, but I need a break. But because also their break is having lunch and chatting. That's the last thing we need. We need to be able to take ourselves away from the environment, to not only give our mouths a rest, but also to give our mind a rest, because there's so much going on. So, I wish I'd advocated and said the maximum amount of hours per is this long for a meeting. After that, we need so many breaks. And the break includes me, and I'm not being rude, but I need to walk away from the meeting and I will come back. So I think communicating that to your team can be really helpful.
That's super wise, and it's very timely for me because I had kind of landed on the 10 a.m. thing. I was like, I'm not good before 10 a.m. Like, could I? I mean, I'm sure I could, but like, it's just a lot. It's a big ask to be
Yeah.
up, out,
Yeah.
ready, whatever. Even if, and I work from home, so even if it's just rolling down the stairs to, be on the computer, it's a lot. But then the time in my overwhelm factor, just I hit it much faster right now. And the haven't been in. That's not true. My CEO and a couple of coworkers were at an event a couple hours from here, and it was about a month maybe after, or maybe about 3 weeks after I finished radiation, and it was just too close to not go say hi. And she had reached out, and so anyway, I went up, but it was like an hour, maybe two, and I was like, I need a day, whole day to recover.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's very timely. Yeah,
Yeah.
good words of
And I
wisdom there.
think, yeah, and I think it's really good to have those open conversations
Hmm.
just so they know that you say, my energy, like what you're getting from me is still good value, because I'm still
Yeah.
just as capable as what I was before. But whereas before I had an unlimited amount of resources available to me, because we could all dig deep, right? That's the philosophy we are grown up in. When we have to deliver a project, you dig deep and you get through it. That's the bit you're missing now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can still do it, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And there will come a point, and not anytime soon, but in a year or 2 or 3 time, where you need to get a project over the line,
Hmm.
and you'll just have to say, okay, I can do that for you, but the payoff is I'm going to have 3 days off, and you're
Yeah.
going to have to pay me for those 3 days
That's
because
totally
I
fair.
am
Yeah,
not giving.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want me to expend more energy than what I have, there will be a price to pay.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the other, I think when you're was also really, I think good to communicate is the fatigue
Hmm.
aspect.
Hmm.
So sometimes concentration just
Yeah.
goes, and that's
Hmm.
fine. And I've noticed myself, if I try to force my way through, I'm making it worse. So sometimes just stepping away, but that also means sometimes we work some really weird hours. And I have like little bursts of like energy later in the day. And I've when I was working for an employer in a team, I would tell people, look, if I email you out of hours, you don't need to reply until you're back at your desk. Only because I have to sometimes work weird hours to accommodate for my needs throughout the day.
Hmm.
That's fine. But it works the other way around. You might not get an instant reply from me during the day. That's not because I'm not working. It's maybe just because I need a moment in that day.
The boundaries. It's important to know, and
Yeah.
I love the work that I do, and I haven't historically needed to do a ton of boundary setting, and I'm learning. I think it's important to learn for yourself that's okay. It doesn't mean that you love it any less or that you're any less valuable. To your point, it's you need
Yeah.
to be able to protect your energy so that you can continue adding that value. And my husband has been very good at reminding me that everyone wants me to succeed, just like I want
Yeah.
others to succeed. No one wants me to fail at this, especially at this reentry or, critical, like let's come back and re-engage with the rest of life. And that's a powerful reminder too.
That's really powerful. Amazing. Amy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. The hour has just vanished. That's always a good sign. I've had a really great time. I've learned so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Amy. Um, And we are coming towards the end of our season 2. So there's another couple of episodes left before we go on summer break. So on that note, I will just say, as always, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a nice review. It helps us. And we look forward to having you back next week. Thank you so much, everyone. Amy, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.